The starship Venturer of Dawn carved its way through interstellar dust like a spear hurled by a forgotten titan, its hull scattering motes of cosmic frost in glittering arcs behind it. Within its walls, humanity's finest minds hurried between stations, murmuring to one another as they prepared to breach the edge of a region of space no one had ever successfully mapped. The anomaly was known only through ghost readings and distorted long-range reflections, yet every physicist on the expedition agreed it was unnatural. That alone was enough to compel the Earth Council to authorize the mission. Humanity had never left an unknown unchallenged. Ever since the species had snapped the boundary of the solar system's gravity well and pushed outward, it had carried a stubborn insistence that everything could be understood if studied long enough. It was an arrogance born not out of entitlement, but of a relentless pattern of success. One hurdle after another had been cleared. One barrier after another had been shattered. The crew of the Venturer of Dawn had inherited that history, each of them motivated by the belief that the universe yielded its mysteries only to those brave enough to demand answers. At the helm stood Peregrine Haldron, a tall and usually quiet man whose presence seemed to draw the attention of a room even when he said nothing. He was not famed for grand speeches or inspirational declarations. His leadership was measured instead by action, a steady and unshakable calm that had guided him through more missions than anyone else aboard. His dark eyes remained fixed on the spiraling readings unfolding across the navigation display as the anomaly slowly bled into visible space, a swirl of violet and obsidian, shifting in fractal patterns that refused to remain still. He studied it for several moments before speaking. "Begin reducing velocity. I want full sensor arrays directed toward the epicenter. Feed everything directly to the analysis banks." Across the bridge, confirmation voices rose in a smooth wave. The hum of the ship's engines deepened. The anomaly grew larger, swelling across the viewport until it filled nearly half the frame. It resembled a wound torn through the fabric of the cosmos, pulsing faintly with an inner luminescence that flirted with recognizable structure, but dissolved the moment one tried to focus. "Does anyone else feel that?" murmured Andalin Vera, the chief xenophysicist, her hands hovering over the console as if she were afraid touching anything might provoke the thing outside. She was a restless mind, always moving, always questioning, always peering into the cracks of every oddity the universe presented. Today her curiosity warred with unease. A few of the officers nodded. "Gravity fluctuations," said the ship's systems sentinel, a broad-shouldered woman named Marith Callies. "Localized. Mild enough that the artificial balance should compensate, but they don't follow any expected waveform." Andalin shook her head. "No, it's more than that. It feels as if something is watching us." Peregrine did not respond to that, not yet. "Bring us to position," he ordered instead. The ship slowed until it hovered just outside the anomaly's maximum influence range. The space around them shimmered. Lights dimmed. Andalin exhaled sharply as half her readings blinked out. "We are losing standard data capture. Whatever that region is, it's generating interference across the whole spectrum." "Switch to manual observation," Peregrine said. "Adjust optical filters. Let's see how it shifts under contrast." The engineering station complied. Filters layered over the viewport, each revealing something the previous had concealed. The anomaly twisted like a living thing. Its swirling edges seemed to peel back, revealing hints of embedded geometry shapes that should not have been able to form naturally. Then, abruptly, something within the darkness flared. Not light, not energy in any known form, a pulse of intention. Even those who did not believe in such concepts felt it. The ship shuddered. A tremor rolled through the hull as if a massive hand had brushed against it. "Report," Peregrine said evenly, though his fingers tightened around the side rail of the command platform. "No damage," Marith said, scanning furiously, "but something just reached into our systems. It touched every sensor circuit simultaneously." "Touched," Andalin repeated. "That implies I know what it implies, Marith snapped. Peregrine raised one hand, silencing them both. The anomaly expanded, not visually, not physically, but mentally. Every person on the bridge felt a strange pressure against their thoughts, like the sensation of being in a crowded room where countless eyes lingered too long. And then something impossible happened. The anomaly spoke, not with sound, not with language. It was a message delivered directly into the mind of every human aboard the ship, a presence brushing against their awareness with ancient weight and contemptuous curiosity. You are trespassing. The words were not truly words. They were impressions carved with razor-edged precision. Your species presses its hands against doors that were sealed before your ancestors learned to fear the dark. You cannot pass. You will not advance further, turn back, or be unmade. The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers recoiled, some clutching their heads, others gasping as if struck. Andalin staggered backward until she collided with her consul. Marith swore under her breath. Peregrine alone did not move. His posture locked into stillness, his expression unreadable as the echo of the message faded. Humanity had encountered alien intelligence before beasts of instinct, swarms of mindless ferocity, even one species that communicated through scent and vibration patterns but lacked complex societal structure. Nothing like this had ever occurred. Nothing that looked at humanity and deemed it lacking, nothing that ordered retreat as though humanity were an insect. Peregrine inhaled slowly, then spoke with the same calm that had carried him through every impossible situation of his life. Stabilize the ship. Reorient our heading 20 degrees starboard. Bring us closer. Andalin spun toward him. Closer, Peregrine, that thing can kill us with a thought. It hasn't, he replied, eyes still locked on the anomaly. If it wanted us dead, we would not be having this conversation. It warned us, Marith insisted. We should take the hint. Humanity does not turn back because of threats, he said, not loudly, not forcefully, but with a conviction that silenced the room. The truth of the statement resonated in every heart present. Human history was a tapestry of defiance stitched across centuries. No barrier had ever stopped them for long, not nature, not physics, not the vast, airless void between stars. The ship edged forward. The anomaly rippled as though reacting to the movement. The presence returned, colder this time. You persist. Why? Peregrine did not speak aloud. Instead, he allowed his thoughts to form an answer, projecting not a challenge but a truth. Because we must know. The presence recoiled, not in fear, something far worse. In disdain. Curiosity is not strength. You reach beyond your design. Your kind is fragile, small, bound to a world that should have kept you. You were never meant to walk these regions. Leave now. For the first time, a flicker of anger rose in Peregrine's chest, not for himself, but for everything his species had struggled to achieve. The presence sensed it. Ah, pride, the most dangerous flaw of your kind. You believe yourselves unconquerable simply because you have not yet been crushed. The anomaly churned. Vortices formed across its surface, spiraling like colossal serpents of shadow. Andalin stumbled forward, panic rising in her voice. Peregrine, if we stay any longer, a shockwave erupted outward. The ship buckled, power flared and died. Sparks burst from overhead conduits. The lights flickered wildly before plunging the bridge into a dim red glow. A few officers were thrown to the floor. Alarms wailed. Marith gripped her console as it poured out error after error. Multiple system failures, hull integrity stable but shields are down, engines at 50%, life support fluctuating. The presence pressed in, last warning. Peregrine steadied himself, breath slow, eyes narrowing. Humanity had been threatened countless times throughout its history. It had been pushed, cornered, challenged. It had been told to kneel, and it had refused, again and again. Peregrine found his voice. We are not your subjects, and we do not yield. As if in answer, the anomaly lashed out. A tendril of black-violet energy shot forward, striking the ship's forward hull. The impact hurled the vessel backward. Metal screamed. The floor shook. Half the bridge collapsed into darkness as power conduits ruptured. Andalin was hurled against her chair and slumped, dazed. Marith cursed and fought to keep the systems online. Peregrine clung to the railing as the air split with a sound like tearing fabric. The presence no longer projected thoughts. It roared, then be destroyed, but even in the chaos, something unexpected happened. A burst of energy erupted from the ship, uncommanded, uncontrolled, but undeniably human-made. A failsafe reactor surge, triggered by the anomaly's interference, released a pulse that struck the swirling mass head-on. A tear opened in the anomaly's surface, a wound inside a wound. And from that tear spilled something the crew could not comprehend, a cascade of fractured images, glimpses of structures older than solar systems, of beings towering over galaxies, of wars fought with forces beyond particle interaction. And one image lingered, one the presence had not meant for them to see. A colossal being, dying, a remnant of an ancient empire that had believed itself eternal. The presence recoiled in horror. Enough, the anomaly convulsed. It slammed closed, folding in on itself like a collapsing star, dragging an immense suction of space-time with it. The ship tumbled in the gravitational whiplash. The bridge tilted. Gravity spun out of control. The crew were flung sideways. Peregrine hit the floor hard, pain cracking through his ribs. The ship broke free from the collapsing anomaly's pull and drifted, powerless, into stable dark. Silence filled the bridge, not peaceful silence, but the stunned quiet that followed catastrophe. Systems sputtered weakly. Emergency lights cast elongated shadows. Andalin groaned as she pushed herself upright. "We survived," Marith checked her failing console. "Barely, but yes." Whatever that thing was, it retreated. Peregrine slowly rose, bracing against the ruined railing. The anomaly was gone. Nothing remained but faint ripples of displaced starlight, already fading. But they had seen something inside it, something monumental, something forbidden, something the presence had wanted hidden at any cost. Humanity had just punched open the door of a room that ancient powers had locked ages ago, and they had peeked inside. The universe had noticed, and it was angry. Peregrine exhaled, steadying himself. "Begin repairs, prepare a full report, mark this location for immediate relay to Earth when communications are restored." Andalin looked at him with wide, shaken eyes. "Peregrine, whatever we just encountered, it wasn't just an obstacle, it was a guardian. I know, guardians only exist when there is something worth guarding." "I know," he repeated, voice low. She hesitated. "What do we do now?" Peregrine gazed into the wounded stretch of space where the anomaly had been, the echo of its presence still lingering in the back of his mind. A guardian had tried to stop them. It had failed. Humanity had survived an encounter it was never meant to survive. That alone changed everything. His answer came softly, but with the unyielding conviction of a species that had climbed out of the mud and reached for the stars with bloodied hands and burning hope. "We go forward." The Venturer of Dawn drifted in the aftermath of catastrophe, its once glittering hull scarred by blackened streaks where the anomaly's force had carved deep wounds. Inside, the ship's pulse was weak. Backup power kept the essential systems barely alive, casting every corridor in a dim red haze that made shadows stretch like skeletal fingers. The crew moved with the slow, deliberate focus of people who understood that a single misstep could turn disaster into oblivion. Peregrine Haldren stood within the central diagnostics chamber, watching streams of half-corrupted data cascade across the massive display. The air smelled faintly of burnt circuitry. Engineers worked around him, their quiet murmurs punctuated by sudden bursts of static or sparks as damaged panels were pried open. He reviewed each line of information, searching for answers in the fragments they had managed to salvage from the anomaly's assault. They had no full recordings, too much had been lost when the systems overloaded. But they had pieces, shattered moments, glimpses. And one sequence, captured by sheer luck during the energy pulse that had ripped open the anomaly's surface, played again and again on the screen, an immense being collapsing beneath the weight of cosmic forces, its body dissolving into a storm of violet fire as ancient structures imploded around it. Every time Peregrine watched, he felt the same tightening in his chest. Or, fear. And something else, something sharper, determination. Andalin Vera entered the chamber, clutching a data slate so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She joined him at the display, exhaling shakily. "We've run the image filters a dozen times," she said. "The physics department is arguing with itself. Half of them think the structures in that recording defy natural law. The other half think the laws themselves were different back then." "Back then?" Peregrine asked without looking away from the screen. "How far back?" "Farther than humanity existed," Andalin said. "Farther than Earth's star has burned. The energy signatures alone imply that whatever we saw was older than our entire species." She hesitated. "And it was dying." Peregrine nodded slowly. "It wasn't just dying, it was being erased." Andalin shivered. "You think the Guardian did it?" "No," he said, tone thoughtful. "The presence we encountered spoke as though it was enforcing something, protecting something, but that," he gestured toward the recording, "that felt like a war." Andalin swallowed hard. "There are traces of harmonic resonance in the pulse that revealed the scene. A kind of encoded echo. It's faint, but I'm running a deeper analysis." Peregrine finally turned to her. "Encoded by the anomaly? Maybe, or maybe the event imprinted itself onto whatever dimension we glimpsed. Think of it like a scar burned into layered space." Peregrine considered that. "Have the others recovered enough to begin full diagnostics?" Andalin nodded. "Marith is working on engine restoration. Communications are still down, but she thinks she can reroute power to bring them online within a few hours. The crew is shaken, but stable." Peregrine inclined his head. Good. That meant they had time limited, but enough to understand what they had stumbled upon before the universe decided to throw another impossibility at them. The door slid open and Marith Callies strode inside, wiping sweat and soot from her forehead. Her voice was gruff but steady. "Engines are responding. We can maneuver at 30% capacity. Life support is stable. Communications are next." Her eyes flicked to the central display. "Still staring at that horror show? Until we know what it means," Peregrine replied. "We can't prepare for what comes next." Marith snorted. "I'd settle for preparing to not explode in the next hour." But she stepped closer, gaze narrowing as the collapsed being flickered across the image once more. "Whatever it was," she murmured, "it looks like it ruled everything it touched." Andalin nodded. "Its scale alone suggests control over forces comparable to stellar manipulation." Marith folded her arms. "Then how did it die?" Peregrine pressed a command. The image paused on an expanding wave of energy radiating from the being's crumbling form. "That," he said, "is the question." Andalin angled her slate, enlarging one segment. "Look at the background structures. They're not buildings. They're containment arrays. Each one is tied into a dimensional lattice. Whatever this being was, it wasn't just living in that place. It was held there." Marith's eyes widened. "You're saying it was imprisoned or bound?" Andalin replied softly. Peregrine studied the frozen image. The Guardian had reacted violently when the ship's surge exposed this memory. Instinctively, fearfully. That alone changed everything. A being powerful enough to warp space had feared the revelation of this image, feared humanity seeing it, which meant the truth behind that dying titan mattered. Tremendously. Peregrine spoke quietly. "We need to analyze the energy imprint again, see if there are additional layers." Andalin nodded. "I'll begin immediately." Marith crossed her arms. "While the science team digs through cosmic nightmares, I'll try to give us more than a drifting coffin for a ship." Peregrine allowed a faint smile. "Do that." Marith grunted and left. Andalin followed shortly after, already engrossed in her data. Peregrine remained alone, gazing once more at the image of the dying giant. Something tugged at him, an instinct honed over a lifetime of commanding teams into the unknown. Whatever destroyed, that being could destroy far more, and something did not want humanity to know. Peregrine turned away from the screen. They had barely survived their first encounter, but the universe had just revealed that there were deeper currents at work. And if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was sinking its hands into mysteries no one else dared touch. He left the diagnostics chamber, boots echoing down the dimly lit corridor. As he walked, crew members saluted or nodded in weary acknowledgement. Even shaken, even exhausted, the people aboard this vessel still carried the spark of humanity's stubborn fire. They would endure. They would adapt. They would push forward. Hours passed. The ship's wounded systems groaned back to life one by one. Sparks still flew from exposed conduits. Bulkheads rattled occasionally like protesting bones, but progress was being made. Peregrine entered the bridge just as Marith let out a triumphant growl. "Communications restored," she declared. The crew erupted into relieved applause. Peregrine allowed a moment of satisfaction before speaking. "Transmit a priority message to Earth. Include all data we've gathered. Mark it as an immediate threat-level discovery." Marith nodded and began entering the commands. "We'll need to rotate the array manually," she warned. "Auto-targeting is still fried, but I can get it done." Andolin arrived moments later, her face pale with a mix of excitement and dread. She held the slate with both hands, almost reverently. "Peregrine," he turned toward her. "What did you find?" "More than I expected," she whispered. "More than I wanted." She connected her slate to the bridge display. The screen came alive with the anomaly imprint, this time enhanced, layered, dissected. "The pulse we captured carried multiple echoes," she said. "Not one event, several. It's like a stacked history compressed into a single burst." She pressed a command. The first image displayed the dying Titan again. She tapped again. Another image emerged. A different figure, smaller than the Titan, but still impossibly large, standing amidst shattered fragments of a world. Tapping again revealed yet another, a gathering of giants, each unique but all radiating power, locked in a conflict that tore stars apart. Gasps rose from the bridge crew. Peregrine's jaw tightened. "How many echoes?" Andolin swallowed. "7. She displayed the last one, a void, empty, silent, bereft of anything. Yet in its emptiness lay a sense of profound loss. These beings," Andolin continued, "existed long before human evolution. They battled forces on a scale we can't begin to quantify, and the final echo shows nothing. Whatever happened, it wiped them out completely." Marith spoke softly. "Ancient gods dying in the dark." Andolin shook her head. "Not gods, civilizations, species, powers that shaped the early universe." Peregrine exhaled. "The Guardian told us we were trespassing, that we were reaching beyond our design." "Which means," Andolin said quietly, "it sees us as a threat, or at least as a species capable of discovering something it doesn't want known." Marith frowned. "Why would a cosmic guardian care what humans learn?" Peregrine answered. "Because knowledge leads to capability. Capability leads to power. And power challenges those who already hold it." The bridge fell silent. Andolin's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Peregrine, I think these echoes came from a sealed dimension, a prison or tomb, and the Guardian's purpose is to keep it sealed." Peregrine nodded. "And we cracked it open." Marith cursed softly. "So what now? That thing could come back, or something worse." Peregrine stepped forward, his posture steady. "We need to know more. We need to understand what was imprisoned, who imprisoned it, and why." "You want to go back?" Marith said incredulously. "Not now," Peregrine replied. "We need to repair the ship first. We need Earth scientists. We need reinforcements. But we can't ignore this. The universe just warned humanity to turn back." He paused, eyes narrowing with unbreakable resolve. "That means we're on the right path." Andolin stared at him, a mixture of fear and admiration in her eyes. "If the Guardian senses us again, it might erase us." "Then we'll make sure it can't," Peregrine said. "Humanity has been underestimated before, and every time we've proven otherwise." Marith let out a slow exhale. "All right. I'll get the engines fully operational, but I want it on the record that this is either the bravest or the most reckless thing humanity has ever attempted." Peregrine allowed a faint smile. "History often confuses the two." The bridge doors slid open again. A young technician hurried inside, eyes wide. "Commander, long-range sensors are picking up something." Peregrine turned sharply. "What is it?" "A disturbance," the technician said nervously. "Similar to the anomaly's signature, but not identical. It's following us." Andolin blanched. "The Guardian?" or something else from that dimension, Marith muttered. Peregrine's voice remained calm. Display it. The view screen flickered, and the stars warped as a small tear opened in distant space. Not large, not threatening, but unmistakable, a ripple of violet and obsidian pulsing faintly like a wounded creature, and from within its depths something shifted. Watching, waiting, humanity had been noticed, and the universe had no intention of letting them walk away unchanged. Peregrine straightened. Prepare the ship. Whatever comes through that tier, we will face it. The crew moved instantly. Fear no longer paralyzed them. It sharpened them, strengthened them, became purpose. The tier widened. A shadow emerged. The unknown approached, and humanity stood ready to meet it. The tier in space widened as if pried open by unseen hands, its edges crawling with violet fractures that flickered like lightning trapped in liquid shadow. The bridge crew of the Venturer of Dawn stood in taut silence as the distortion pulsed a slow, rhythmic cadence that felt disturbingly like breath. Every instinct in every human present screamed danger, but not one person moved to retreat. Humanity had always faced the unknown by stepping toward it, not away. Peregrine Haldren watched the tier with unwavering focus. His posture remained calm, but his thoughts churned beneath the surface like an ocean in storm. The Guardian had warned them. The universe itself seemed to recoil from whatever lay beyond that veil, yet the tier continued to expand as though claws were raking through reality from the other side. Increase magnification, Peregrine said. The view screen zoomed until the distortion filled the center of the display. Behind the writhing violet light lay a darkness too absolute to be natural, a void, a hollow absence that seemed to swallow the starlight around it. Then something moved within it, a shape, elongated, multi-limbed. Its outline shimmered and broke apart like liquid shadow, refusing to settle on one form. Andalyn Vera stepped closer to the screen without realizing it, her voice a whisper. It isn't like the Guardian. Marith Callies nodded grimly. No, this one looks like it crawled out of a nightmare. But it hasn't attacked, Peregrine noted. Not yet. The creature drifted partially from the tier. Its limbs unfurled like strands of ink flowing through water, thin and sinuous, each ending in a cluster of shimmering points that glowed with faint, pulsing light. Where its face should have been, there was only a shifting mass, no eyes, no mouth, nothing resembling a biological structure. Yet everyone on the bridge felt unmistakably that it was staring at them. The temperature dropped. Frost formed at the corners of the bridge displays. The lights dimmed until they flickered like dying stars. And then the presence pressed into their minds. Not words this time, images, memories not their own. A world built from translucent crystal towers that hummed with song-like resonance. A species tall and luminous, their bodies composed of layered light that shifted through colors like emotion made visible. A civilization flourishing in peace for millennia. A sudden rupture in their sky. A hole torn open by forces beyond their understanding. And from that hole came titans, giant beings of impossible scale. The luminous people fled. Their towers shattered. Their world burned. The images condensed into a single moment. The creature standing at the center of ruins, surrounded by the lifeless forms of its people, their light extinguished. A single thought accompanied the memory. Help me, the presence faded, and the creature floated motionless once more. Andalyn reeled, gripping a console for support. It's asking for help, she whispered. Marith's eyes narrowed. Or it's showing us bait. Peregrine considered both possibilities. Humanity had learned long ago that the universe did not owe them truth, but instinct mattered, and something about the images had felt raw and unfiltered pain, so ancient it had worn grooves into the creature's being. Peregrine addressed the crew. We maintain distance, but do not fire unless it moves to attack. The creature extended one limb, pointing toward the ship. Its form rippled, and a wave of energy radiated outward, gentle, almost hesitant. The Venturer of Dawn groaned under the pressure, but held steady. Andalyn quickly scanned the readings. It's scanning us, non-invasive, almost cautious. Can it understand us? Marith asked. Maybe, Andalyn said. Or maybe it senses our thoughts the same way the Guardian did. Peregrine stepped closer to the screen. If it came from the same dimension we breached, it may have been trapped there, or hiding there. Andolin swallowed. You think it escaped when the Guardian attacked us, that our surge opened the door just long enough? Possibly. Marith shook her head. This just keeps getting better. The creature drifted nearer, but still made no hostile motion. The violet tear behind it pulsed more violently now, as though reacting. The creature turned tilted, and a low tremor rippled through space. The tear shuddered. Cracks of pure black began spreading across it. Andolin gasped. It's destabilizing. Peregrine's voice snapped into command mode. Marith, pull us back. Increase distance immediately. Marith's hands flew across the controls. The engines rumbled and the ship edged backward, slowly at first, then faster. The creature moved with them, staying the same distance away, as if seeking refuge. The tear tore wider. A bellow of soundless fury rippled through the void, felt instead of heard, like a scream inside the bones. And something vast stirred behind the fracture. A silhouette formed, immense, writhing, radiating hate. Andolin's blood ran cold. The Guardian. It was larger than before, or perhaps it had always been this large and had merely concealed its full size earlier. Its shape remained indistinct, shifting between fractal edges and fluid forms, but its presence hammered against the minds of the crew like a heavy fist. The creature between humanity and the Guardian, the luminous remnant, shrank back, its limbs curling inward in clear terror. The Guardian's voice slammed into their thoughts like a storm of sharpened edges. You brought corruption into this realm. You dare free what must remain bound. The fallen must not walk again. You have broken the seal. Humans, you overreach. You always overreach. The creature trembled, its limbs shaking. Memories surged again, fragments of its civilization's fall, the horrors unleashed by the titans who once destroyed its world. And the Guardian's voice thundered over the visions. These remnants must never escape. They belong to the dead age. They carry the echoes of the old wars. Peregrine clenched his jaw. It isn't hostile, he said firmly, speaking to the Guardian through defiant thought. It's a survivor. Survivors of that era bring ruin. Their existence is contamination. The dimensions were sealed to prevent their spread. It must be erased, and you with it. Andolin shouted across the bridge. Peregrine, it's preparing an attack. Energy buildup is a surge of violet-black energy erupted from the Guardian, streaking toward both the ship and the trembling creature. Peregrine reacted instantly. Marith, evasive maximum thrust. Marith slammed her palm onto the controls. The ship lurched violently to the side, gravity fields struggling to compensate. The energy blast skimmed past the hull close enough to make metal glow white-hot and alarms scream. The creature darted aside with impossible speed, its body flattening into a ribbon-like shape as the blast tore through the space it had occupied moments before. The Guardian unleashed a second pulse. This time the creature did not evade. It braced itself, limbs spreading like a shield. The blast struck it head-on. The bridge lights flared. The creature's limbs shattered into fragments of shimmering light before reforming unevenly. It was weakening, dying, and still it put itself between humanity and the Guardian. Peregrine's heart struck hard against his ribs. Why would it defend us? Andolin's breath trembled. Because it remembers watching its own people slaughtered. And it sees us as the same kind of vulnerable species. Marith cursed under her breath. Wonderful. So the Guardian wants to kill us and the monster wants to save us. Backwards day in the universe. The Guardian shifted, growing even larger. Its limbs extended like colossal blades of obsidian light. You violated the seal. You saw what lies beyond. You threatened the balance that was forged in fire and death. Your kind must forget. Your kind must be contained. The creature pulsed weakly, sending another memory into their minds. Not of war this time, but of a shining spire, intact and glowing, the heart of its civilization, where knowledge was stored, where warnings had been carved in light. And then, a map, a star map. Highlighting coordinates far beyond the anomaly, a place marked with the resonance of the Titan echoes, a place the Guardian did not want revealed. Andolin gasped aloud. It's trying to show us something, it's giving us a destination. Peregrine nodded sharply. It wants us to know the truth behind its imprisonment. The Guardian sensed the transfer. It roared with cosmic fury. Space buckled. The tier behind it twisted violently as if the fabric of the cosmos strained to hold it back. Marith, Peregrine commanded, voice cold and sharp, prepare to run, plot a course to the coordinates the creature sent. Marith stared at him. You want to run toward the thing the universe tried to bury? Yes, Peregrine said without hesitation. Because someone went to unimaginable lengths to keep it hidden, and because every time humanity has been told what it cannot do, it has done exactly that. Andolin's eyes gleamed with fierce resolve. We can't let the Guardian erase this being or the truth. The creature gathered its remaining strength, projecting a final thought toward them. Go. The Guardian charged its entire form, energy cresting like a tidal wave. Peregrine shouted, Marith now. The engines screamed as the Venturer of Dawn launched itself backward, just as the Guardian's full wrath exploded outward in a colossal surge. The creature darted forward, intercepting the blast. Light engulfed it. For a moment, the bridge was blinded by brilliance. When the flare faded, the creature's form was dissolving, its body collapsing into drifting motes of luminous dust. It had sacrificed itself fully to protect them. The Guardian tore through the remnants and surged after the ship. Marith forced every remaining ounce of power into the engines. The ship shot across the void, trailing sparks from overtaxed thrusters. The Guardian gave chase, shredding distance with every pulse. We won't outrun it, Marith shouted. We don't need to outrun it, Peregrine said. We only need to reach the jump threshold. Andolin kept her eyes on the navigation display. 3 more seconds. Marith, divert life support and inertial dampeners to the core, Peregrine ordered. Marith's eyes widened. That will knock out half the crew. Do it, Marith obeyed. Lights dimmed. Gravity wavered. The ship trembled on the edge of collapse. The Guardian loomed behind them, filling the viewscreen with its roaring cosmic fury. Jump, Peregrine commanded. Space tore open. The ship dove through and the Guardian's claws scraped the edge of the portal, nearly dragging them back. But the jump completed. Stars blurred into streaks. The Venturer of Dawn vanished from the Guardian's reach, hurtling toward the forbidden coordinates burned into its memory by a dying remnant of an ancient age. Behind them, the universe screamed in rage. Ahead lay answers older than galaxies. The sky above the desert station burned a copper orange as the sun climbed, dragging heat across the cracked stones and metal plating that made up the outpost's outer yard. Commander Ravel stood at the threshold, hands clasped behind his back, watching the last of the maintenance drones skitter along the fence like cautious insects. They deposited wafers of charged shielding material before retreating into their underground pods. They were tireless and obedient, but even their precision could not ease the tightness building in his chest. For 3 nights now, ever since the signal burst from the derelict vessel had reached the station's receivers, he had found his thoughts splitting between exhilaration and dread. The message encrypted within the first data packet still echoed in his memory. A plea, a warning, a fragmented declaration from one of the rarest sentient species ever catalogued. A species known among scholars for their deep psionic sensitivity, their vanishing populations, and their near-legendary refusal to engage with humankind. That they had reached out, however brokenly, was astonishing. That the message ended in an abrupt howl of pain and static was chilling. He turned as the laboratory doors slid open and Dr. Samorin stepped out, still fastening the cuff of his sleeve. The man's face was marked by sleeplessness, but there was a spark in his eyes that made him seem newly wired with purpose. He strode across the yard with hurried steps, boots scraping over the dust, until he reached Ravel's side. We completed a full spectral analysis of the memory imprint, he said without preamble. The origin is confirmed. The mind that produced that signal belonged to a member of the auric convergence species, and not merely any individual one trained in their ancestral disciplines. This was someone with extraordinary sensitivity. Ravel's jaw tightened as he absorbed the news. Then the emotional surge at the end. Samorin inhaled deeply. Agony, and before that, a kind of focused terror we cannot easily quantify. There were images disjointed, incoherent, but enough to suggest a predator of some sort. Something that hunts in a manner that interferes with psionic cognition. Ravel exhaled slowly and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the desert wind brush against his face. "We head for the derelict within the hour," he said. "Have the crew been briefed?" Samorin nodded. "They are uneasy, though, even the seasoned ones. Whatever left that signature, it feels like a thing better left untouched." Ravel allowed himself a grim smile. "Unfortunately, we do not have that luxury." They returned inside, leaving the climbing heat behind. The station's interior was cooler than the desert, but only marginally. The primary cooling system had been running at half capacity since the previous year, and requisition orders for new parts were still outstanding. Ravel passed a cluster of technicians packing crates of instruments. Their voices were hushed, their movements brisk, but edged with anxiety. The sense of an approaching storm radiated through every corridor, even though the skies outside were cloudless. News of the derelict had spread fast among the outpost crew, and rumors traveled even faster. Some whispered that the vessel had materialized from a fold in space, appearing without warning in the outer fringes of the system. Others insisted it was a trap laid by unknown aggressors. A few dared to voice what many feared, that something on that ship was alive. The command center buzzed around him as Ravel stepped inside. Tactical interfaces shimmered above circular tables, each displaying schematic overlays of the derelict. It drifted near the gravitational pull of the system's outermost asteroid belt, its hull dark and scarred, its silhouette resembling a broken crescent. It lacked any familiar configuration known to human explorers or allied communities. Its surface bore sigils that analysts could not decode, although one linguist swore they faintly resembled ancient Auric geometric notation. If that was true, the ship might be older than most modern civilizations. Ravel turned toward the strategist, First Chair Maelden, who stood reviewing sensor logs with her assistants. She saluted crisply before joining him at the central holotable. "Commander, we have completed our approach simulation," she reported. "Gravity wells generated by the derelict's residual engines are unstable. We will need continuous thrust correction, but nothing beyond our capabilities." Ravel nodded. "And potential hazards?" Maelden hesitated. "Aside from the instability, the ship is cold, dark, no signs of life, but the interior architecture appears labyrinthine. We will need to tether every scouting unit and crew member. Losing line of sight could become a fatal mistake." Ravel had already expected as much. He had explored abandoned ships before, ones overrun by parasites, ones broken by war or disaster. But this vessel had an entirely different presence. It felt less like a ruin and more like a crypt sealed for reasons no one yet understood. After final checks and briefings, the crew assembled in the launch hangar. The shuttle was compact yet sturdy, its hull reinforced for deep space anomalies. Ravel watched as the boarding ramp lowered and the team filed inside, Maelden with her quiet confidence, Samorin carrying 3 cases of analysis equipment, Navigator Duran, tall and sharp-eyed, and 4 expedition soldiers Arasan, Calvoran, Nuril, and Tomai, each equipped with scanning plates, atmospheric masks, and high-luminescence harnesses. Ravel stepped aboard last. As the ramp sealed shut behind him, he felt a small shift inside his chest, a blend of anticipation and helplessness. He had chosen this mission, yet it felt as though the mission had also chosen him. The shuttle lifted from the hangar floor with a soft hum that grew into a rising vibration as the engines ignited. The view outside shifted from the stone outcrop of the station to the wavering sands and finally to the endless sky. Within minutes, the craft pierced the atmosphere and ascended into the cold emptiness of space, trailing a faint trail of ionization. Ravel strapped himself into the forward seat and watched the stars drift past. Samorin, seated beside him, stared out with a haunted expression. "The imprint we decoded," he murmured after a long silence, "was strong enough that I dreamed of it last night. The moment of terror, the sharpness of it. I do not know how a mind endures such pain long enough to broadcast it across the void." Ravel met his gaze briefly. "Then we must hope the sender is still alive," he said, "or that their death was not in vain." The rest of the flight passed in tense quiet. When the derelict appeared on their forward sensors, the cockpit dimmed to display its looming shape. It was far larger than the early images had suggested, colossal, its curvature extending like the broken rib of some ancient titan. Jagged tears exposed inner segments of its hull that glowed faintly with residual energy. It rotated slowly in the void, the starlight catching on fragments of metallic plating that floated around it like drifting scales. Mailden leaned forward to analyze the data readings. "Structural stability is unusual," she said. "The ship is broken in several places, but internal bonds hold it together through some kind of energy-based tension. I have never seen this design before." Duran at the navigation console released a low whistle. "It looks less like it was built and more like it was grown." Ravel nodded. "Prepare for docking." The shuttle maneuvered toward an open breach near what appeared to be a mid-level maintenance corridor. The edges of the gap were smooth, almost as if melted. Residue readings confirmed exposure to extreme heat or weapon discharge. The docking clamps extended, locked onto the fragment of hull, and the shuttle shuddered as it settled into place. When the inner hatch opened into the derelict, a hush fell over the crew. They stepped into darkness, illuminated only by their harness lights, which cast pale beams across curving walls that shimmered faintly with organic patterns. The air was stale but breathable, though it carried an undertone like metallic dust. As they moved deeper, faint motes drifted around them, swirling like silver spores. Samorin paused and scanned one with his handheld plate. "Inert," he said, "probably remnants of hull breakdown." But Ravel sensed something else, an atmosphere weighted with memory, as though the ship itself recalled what had transpired here. The corridor branched into three narrow paths. Mailden pointed to the rightmost one. "Thermal imaging picks up faint energy traces in that direction, perhaps from the ship's core." Ravel approved and motioned for the team to advance. The further they walked, the more the derelict's architecture shifted from metal to a smooth, pearlescent material that responded to their movements by adjusting its grain, as if aware of their presence. Calvorin murmured uneasily, "This place feels alive." Nerel frowned, "More like it remembers being alive." Ravel said nothing, but the sensation pressed heavily on him as well. They reached a wide chamber where the floor dipped into a central pool of translucent gel. Broken conduits jutted from the ceiling, leaking pale threads of luminous fluid into the pool. The gel rippled with tiny waves that pulsed at slow intervals. Samorin knelt beside it and dipped a probe into the substance. "This is extraordinary," he breathed. "It's a bioconduit matrix. Something used for information storage or maybe energy distribution. It may be carrying the residual imprint we detected earlier." Ravel surveyed the chamber's perimeter and noticed a recess on the far wall, an alcove with a smooth platform raised slightly above the floor. Lying upon it was a body. He approached slowly, signaling the others to remain alert. The figure was slender and long-limbed, its skin a soft metallic gold. Its features were delicate, with high angular cheekbones and a crest of thin, filamentous strands where hair might have been. Its torso rose and fell faintly. Ravel's heart quickened. "Alive," he whispered. Samorin rushed to his side, lifting his scanner. "Unconscious, but stable. This is unquestionably one of the auric convergence." And his voice trailed off. Ravel looked at him sharply. "What is it?" Samorin swallowed. "There are psionic disturbances around them, faint echoes like shards of a shattered memory, and something else. A foreign presence, aggressive, invasive, lingering like a toxin." Ravel motioned for the soldiers to take defensive positions. "We will evacuate them to the shuttle." Whatever attacked them may, a trembling vibration passed through the chamber floor, cutting him off. The gel pool shivered violently, and the walls emitted a low hum that rose in pitch. Maelden spun toward the nearest corridor. Movement. Something is approaching. The lights of their harnesses flickered as the air temperature dropped abruptly. A thin, wailing resonance echoed through the passage before them, like a distorted whisper scraping through metal. Tomai raised her weapon. "Contact front," she said steadily. The shadows coiled. Then something emerged. It moved like a ripple of shadow given shape. Its body was semi-translucent, composed of vein-like strands that pulsed with dull red light. It had no discernible face, but a cluster of luminous points formed and reformed across its head-like structure as though searching for focus. Its limbs, if they could be called limbs, shifted between solid and fluid states, stretching and contracting with eerie grace. The temperature fell further as it approached, frost crystallizing along the chamber walls. The creature emitted another resonance, stronger this time, and Samorin staggered back with a cry, clutching his head. "Psionic interference," he gasped. "Strong, too strong," the soldiers fired. Their energy bolts struck the creature but dissipated upon impact, absorbed into its shifting form. It lunged forward with startling speed, slamming into Arason and sending him skidding across the floor. The creature's touch left a trail of withering frost across his armor. Ravel drew his blade, an archaic weapon, but powered with vibration fields, and leapt to intercept. The blade met the creature's form and resisted slightly before slicing through a segment of its limb. The severed portion dissolved into vapor, but the creature shrieked in a psionic burst that staggered everyone. The unconscious auric figure convulsed on the platform as the resonance passed through the chamber, as though their mind reacted instinctively to the intrusion. Nurel threw a conductive charge toward the creature. The sphere detonated into a field of crackling energy that adhered to the entity's surface. It writhed, its form destabilizing as the electrical arcs disrupted its coherence. "Now," Ravel shouted. Calverin fired a concentrated pulse that struck the creature at its core. This time, the shot tore a gaping void through its body, and the entity recoiled violently, dissolving into dispersed vapor that scattered across the chamber like dissipating smoke. Silence, true silence, returned. The air warmed slowly. Samorin collapsed to one knee, breathing heavily. "That was not a creature in the biological sense," he said shakily. "It was a psionic predator, a thought-eater. No wonder the auric message ended in agony." Ravel wiped frost from his blade and turned back toward the platform. The auric figure's breathing had grown shallow, but they were still alive. Ravel lifted them carefully into his arms. Their body was light and unnervingly cold, but he felt the faint pulse of life within. "We are leaving," he said firmly. "Now." The team moved with heightened urgency. Every corridor seemed darker than before, every shifting shadow carrying the memory of the predator's wail. Ravel felt the auric figure stir once just barely, as though sensing the movement around them. Samorin remained at his side, monitoring their vitals continuously. "Their mind is unstable," he murmured. "I can feel the remnants of the attack pressing against their consciousness. If they wake too soon," Ravel cut him off with a shake of his head. "We will cross that bridge when it comes." They reached the docking point without further incident, though the ship groaned once beneath them, emitting a harmonic pulse that rippled through the air. Whether it was structural strain or a warning, no one could be certain. The shuttle doors sealed behind them, and Duran initiated immediate departure. As the clamps disengaged, the derelict receded into the viewport, a monolithic shadow against the stars. For a moment, Ravel thought he saw shapes moving within the breach they had used, watching, listening. But then the shuttle accelerated, and the derelict was left behind. Inside, Ravel laid the auric survivor on the medical pallet and stepped back as Samorin began administering stabilizing agents. Maelden secured the cabin, ensuring all systems were locked, and none of the strange residue from the ship contaminated their environment. Arason sat with a grimace, nursing frostbite burns along his arm. Nurel and Calvorin checked their weapons with silent, tense movements. The mission had succeeded in its primary objective, but the implications of what they had witnessed and what they had brought aboard hung in the air like charged electricity. Ravel lowered himself into the seat nearest the pallet, studying the silent figure. Their skin had begun to warm slightly under the medical field. Their chest rose and fell with more steady rhythm. Their eyelids fluttered once. Ravel leaned forward instinctively, unsure whether he wanted them to wake or feared what knowledge their awakening might bring. There were too many questions. What force had slaughtered their people? What had driven them to send a desperate message into the void? What was the psionic predator, and were there more of them drifting through space, hunting minds more than bodies? And above all, why had they reached out specifically to humankind? The survivors' eyelids opened. Their eyes were radiant gold, deeper and more ancient than anything Ravel had seen. For a moment, they stared upward without focus. Then they turned their gaze directly to him. When they spoke, their voice was soft yet resonant, layered with an echo that did not belong to physical sound. "You answered," they whispered. "You came." Ravel leaned closer, speaking gently. "We received your message. You are safe now." The auric figure's eyes trembled not with fear, but with grief so profound it seemed to bend the air around them. "Safe," they repeated, their voice cracking. "No, not safe, not yet. There is no safety, not since the Devouring Mind found us." Ravel exchanged a sharp glance with Samorin. "The Devouring Mind?" Samorin murmured. "Is that what attacked you?" The survivor's golden eyes filled with anguish. "It hunts thought. It consumes connection. It tears away all that binds consciousness to purpose." Their gaze fixed on Ravel again, fierce and urgent. "And now that you have touched the echoes of my memory, it will sense you as well." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Even the hum of the engines seemed to diminish. Ravel felt a cold knot form in his gut. "Are you saying it can track us through thought alone?" The survivor nodded weakly. "It can track anyone who has touched the imprint. It tastes awareness. It follows the threads of cognition like a predator follows scent." Maelden stepped forward, her expression grim. "Commander, we must consider isolating our minds." "If this entity operates through psionic resonance," the survivor shook their head. "You cannot hide, not in the ways you understand, but there is a way to fight it, a way only your kind possesses." Ravel frowned. "Our kind? Why humans specifically?" The survivor closed their eyes, gathering what little strength remained. When they spoke, it was with a mixture of awe and desperation. "Because humans are fragmented, chaotic, brilliant, your minds do not follow predictable patterns. You think in many directions at once, branching and deviating and colliding. The Devouring Mind cannot read you easily. It cannot anticipate you, and that is your greatest weapon." Ravel felt the weight of their words settle heavily on him. To be unpredictable was humanity's nature, often a weakness, yet here it was framed as a shield against a terrifying force. He leaned closer. "Tell us what we must do." The survivor exhaled shakily. "First, you must understand what it is you face." But before they could continue, the shuttle jolted violently as alarms blared across the cabin. Duran shouted from the cockpit, "Commander, something is emerging on long-range sensors. A disturbance in the psionic field." Samorin's face drained of color. "Already, it should not be able to track us this fast unless the imprint connection was stronger than we thought." The auric survivor whispered a single word, their voice trembling with dread. "Run." But Ravel could see in their eyes that running would not be enough. And whatever had marked them in the darkness of the derelict ship was now closing in. The shuttle vibrated as though gripped by an invisible force, its metal frame rattling with a ferocity that sent every unsecured instrument clattering against the walls. Commander Ravel braced himself against the medical pallet as the auric survivor struggled to sit upright, their golden eyes wide with an urgency that transcended pain. A deep, resonant thrum pulsed through the cabin, like the beating of some distant, monstrous heart. The lights flickered, dimmed, then surged at double brightness before stabilizing unevenly. Ravel shouted toward the cockpit, "Report." Navigator Duran's voice came back strained, almost disbelieving. A distortion has formed behind us, no physical object detected, but the sensors are reacting as though something is pulling at our trajectory. It is not gravity, not magnetism, not anything I recognize. The survivor grabbed Ravel's wrist with surprising strength. It is its arrival, they whispered hoarsely. The devouring mind is manifesting. It follows the pathways of thought, appearing where awareness bends most sharply. You touched my memory. It now has a thread to follow. Samorin, gripping the edge of the pallet to steady himself, stared at the survivor with a mixture of fear and fascination. If it is not material, how can it affect the shuttle? The survivor's gaze darkened. Because thought shapes reality in ways you humans seldom perceive. It can twist probability. It can bend intention. It can unmake certainty. And right now, it is trying to force us to stop fleeing. Ravel steadied his breathing. Duran, increase thrust to maximum and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Duran complied, though the shuttle groaned under the strain. Energy flare patterns streaked across the forward viewport as they accelerated, leaving a shimmering trail behind them. For a brief moment, the distortion weakened and the thrum eased, but the sense of being hunted did not. It pressed into each mind aboard like a cold, suffocating hand. Maelden moved to the tactical console and began scanning manually, bypassing automated systems that were struggling to interpret the fluctuating data. "Commander," she said in a low, tense voice, "the psionic field around us is fluctuating in a spiral pattern centered on our location." And I use this term loosely. The presence behind us is projecting interference at a rate that suggests increasing coherence. It is becoming more defined, more capable of interacting with matter. Ravel's jaw tightened, which means if we do not outrun it soon, it may become capable of boarding us. Tomai, still shaken from the encounter on the derelict, gripped her weapon more tightly. "Can it take physical form like the creature we fought?" The survivor shook their head weakly. "The psionic predator you faced was a lesser manifestation, a fragment, a shade born from the devouring mind's hunger. The mind itself is far beyond such forms. It exists as presence, influence, intention. To meet its core form is to have one's consciousness unraveled." Arason muttered, "Well, that sounds pleasant," before flinching in pain from his frostbitten arm. Samorin shot him a sharp look. "Be quiet or conserve your energy, preferably both." The shuttle pitched sharply as Duran executed a lateral burn, pushing them into the outer layers of the system's gravitational field. The stars shifted violently across the viewport. Ravel felt the inertia not through his body as the shuttle's compensators kept that in check, but somewhere deeper, like a tug at the edge of his mind. For an instant, he felt a thought that was not his own brushing against his consciousness. Cold, patient, curious, he recoiled instinctively. The Auric survivor gasped. "It touched you," they said, their voice trembling. "It learns through connection. It tests boundaries. It is seeing whether you will make an easy meal." Ravel steadied himself. "It will learn disappointment." Samorin moved to activate the cognitive dampeners devices designed to suppress telepathic resonance, often used during negotiations with hyperpsionic species to prevent accidental intrusion. But the survivor pushed his hand away. "Do not activate those," they warned. "The mind feeds on suppression. The more you try to hide your thoughts, the more it senses your fear, the more vivid your consciousness becomes to it." Arason blinked. "So the thing hunts us based on how scared we are?" The survivor shook their head slowly. "Not fear itself, patterns, predictable thought, linear cognition, anything that gives it a path to follow." Maelden raised a brow. "Well, humans are not exactly known for being predictable." The survivor managed a faint, exhausted smile. "That is why I reached for your species when all else was lost. Others tried to hide from the mind. They tried to fortify their thoughts. They tried to sever emotion. It consumed them all." Ravel looked toward the cockpit. "Duran, change course. Do not follow a straight path. Make our route as chaotic as possible." Duran nodded, fingers flying across the controls. The shuttle rattled as it shifted through a series of random divergence burns, cutting angles through space, with little regard for fuel efficiency or smooth navigation. Each abrupt alteration in direction loosened the psychic tension slightly, as though the presence behind them struggled to anticipate their next movement. The survivor exhaled shakily. This helps. Humans think in leaps, in sharp turns, in contradictions. The mind must slow to interpret. But the relief was short-lived. Lights across the interior flickered again, this time strobing rapidly. The metal walls pulsed faintly, warping at the edges, as though the cabin itself was bending to an unseen rhythm. Nerel gripped her harness support. "Is it just me?" she said through clenched teeth. "Or is the shuttle breathing?" Samorin checked his instruments, frowning hard. "It is not physical distortion. It is perceptual distortion." The survivor nodded grimly. "The mind is trying to erode your sense of reality. Once you cannot trust what you see, it can slip closer." Ravel resisted the instinct to look behind him. He felt something there like an eye pressed against the back of his thoughts, but he refused to give it attention. That was the trap. Attention gave shape. Attention gave invitation. Maelden's console blared a severe, alert tone. "Commander," she said sharply, "it is projecting ahead of us now, attempting to fold into our trajectory." "We cannot let it do that," Ravel said. "Options. We need to disrupt the psionic field," Samorin said. "Neutralize its focus." Arasan scoffed. "With what? Insults?" Samorin shot him a look. "Actually, unpredictability might help, but not insults." He turned to the survivor. "How do we disrupt its influence without feeding it?" The survivor's eyes dimmed momentarily before refocusing. "Through paradox," they said softly. "Introduce contradictions, confuse the pathways of intention. Your minds excel at chaotic association. You must all think in diverging directions simultaneously." I frowned. "You want us to what? Think nonsense?" "Not nonsense," the survivor replied. "Human poetics, human irrationality, human imagination, these are your natural defenses. This creature is ancient, but it does not create. It consumes. It cannot understand ideas that do not follow a definable path." Ravel did not have time to parse the full implication. The shuttle jerked again, this time violently enough to send Samorin sprawling to the floor. Ravel lunged to help him up. The lights went blood-red as emergency energy rerouted through the hull. Duran shouted, "It is right on top of us, I can feel it." The survivor's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop trying to flee in straight lines. You must confuse its expectations. Fly as your minds think erratically." Ravel called to Duran. "You heard them. Give me the most disobedient flight pattern you can manage." Duran grinned with a kind of reckless desperation. "Gladly." He yanked the controls into a spiraling maneuver that curved through open space with the grace of a drunk comet. The shuttle spun, dipped, then swerved violently upward in a twisting arc that forced the automatic stabilizers to recalibrate at rapid intervals. Everyone aboard was jostled in their harnesses. Samorin cursed loudly as a crate fell against his shin, but the oppressive psychic pressure behind them weakened noticeably. The survivor sagged in relief. "Good, very good. It must slow to interpret your movement." Then something slammed into the hull, not physically, not in any mechanical sense. The impact was felt in their minds. A hollow, resonant blow that made their thoughts ring like struck metal. Arasan clutched his temples. Nerel screamed. Even Ravel felt the force reverberate through his skull, leaving a metallic taste on his tongue. Samorin gasped. "It is attacking directly now. If it breaches higher cognitive layers," the survivor interrupted sharply. "It cannot breach a mind that refuses to move in straight lines. Think sideways, think wildly, imagine impossible things, let your consciousness become chaos." Maelden, ever disciplined, looked genuinely rattled. "Commander, I am not sure I know how to consciously think wildly." Ravel responded tightly, "Then do it unconsciously, panic creatively." Arasan let out a short, ragged laugh. "Panic I can do." As the shuttle twisted through a chaotic set of maneuvers, Ravel forced his mind away from the Predator's looming presence. He thought of the desert station not as a real place, but as a floating island in an endless ocean. He imagined the sand as glass, the sky as water, the station shifting like a dream around him. He imagined standing on its roof, reaching up to pluck stars like fruit. The impression was absurd, illogical, yet something inside him felt lighter. The mind's pressure diminished slightly at the edges. Samorin muttered nonsense to himself, a rapid string of random scientific terminology mixed with impossible theories. Arison recited aloud everything he could think of that made no sense. Inverted mountains, rivers flowing upward, trees whose leaves glowed within a fire. Maelden stared hard at the data readout and imagined it rearranging itself like a puzzle with pieces that did not fit. The survivor's voice came through again, whisper-soft but steady. Yes, yes, this is the way. You are all dissonant in thought. It cannot align its awareness with yours. Lights stabilized slightly, the hull stopped groaning, the pressure eased further. Duran shouted, "Commander, its presence is thinning. I think we are losing it." Ravel exhaled in relief, but did not allow himself to relax fully. Maintain evasive pattern, keep thinking unpredictably. Arison snorted. Never thought my inability to focus would save my life, but here we are. For a brief few minutes, the shuttle soared through space with a semblance of control. The chaotic flight path had carried them far from the distortion, and the devouring mind's influence had weakened to a distant chill that brushed the edge of their awareness, but no longer pierced it. The survivor lay back on the pallet, breathing shallowly. "You have delayed its arrival," they murmured, "but you cannot run indefinitely. It will find you again. It will hunt the strongest mind it touched first." And as their eyes flicked toward Ravel. "Is you?" Ravel felt the weight of that truth settle over him like a cold mantle. Samorin looked at him sharply. "We need to protect your mind. If the creature sees you as its primary target, it will focus on unraveling you." The survivor nodded. "Your mind was the one that resisted most strongly. That intrigues it. It has not encountered a cognition like yours before." Arison could not resist muttering, "Lucky him." Maelden reconfigured the tactical overlay. "Commander, the station is still within return distance. If we increase thrust, we can reach it in under an hour." The survivor shook their head fiercely. "No, do not go back there. The mind will follow the thread. If it reaches the station, all those people, they do not think like you, they will not survive its intrusion." A heavy silence fell over the crew. Ravel closed his eyes briefly. He knew the survivor was right. Returning to the station would doom everyone there. They could not risk it. Samorin rubbed his temples. "Then where do we go?" The survivor hesitated. "There is only one path forward. We must go where the mind cannot easily follow, a place where its senses are distorted, a place of natural cognitive interference." Ravel narrowed his gaze. "Where there is a cluster of crystalline asteroids in the outer reaches of this system," the survivor said. "They emit frequencies that disrupt coherent thought, not harmful to most species, but confusing to psionic entities. If we hide there, we can mask our presence long enough to strategize." Duran pulled up star maps. "I know the region you are referring to. It is unstable, filled with debris and unpredictable gravitational pockets." Maelden frowned. "Navigating that area would be dangerous." Ravel nodded. "But less dangerous than leading the mind to innocent people." He stepped toward the cockpit, set a course for the crystalline cluster. Duran confirmed the command and angled the shuttle toward the distant field. The stars streaked into long lines as they accelerated. Ravel felt the faint residual chill of the mind's presence receding behind them, though not entirely fading. It lingered at the edge of perception, a patient hunter waiting for its prey to pause long enough to strike. Samorin rejoined Ravel at the pallet where the survivor lay. "Their condition is deteriorating," Samorin said quietly. "The mind tore at their consciousness more deeply than I realized. Even with our medical field stabilizing their body, their mind is in danger of collapsing." The survivor opened their eyes weakly. "Do not waste your concern on me. My purpose is to ensure you understand the threat. You must survive long enough to stop it." Ravel met their gaze. "Why us? Why humans? There are other species more powerful, more experienced with psionic threats." The survivor's expression grew distant. "Power does not matter. Predictability is death. The civilizations that tried to resist the mind with structure, discipline, or unity perished first. Their strength became pathways the mind could follow. But humans, you are different. Your minds are fragmented. Individual, erratic, beautifully contradictory, you adapt in ways that defy pattern. That is why I reached for your kind in my final moments. They paused, exhaling with effort. And perhaps, because in your chaos there is hope. Ravel absorbed the words quietly. Across the cabin, Arasan and Neril were securing equipment, maintaining readiness even as fear lingered in their eyes. Tomai ran diagnostics on the hull, ensuring the structural distortions had faded. Maelden reviewed tactical data, her expressions stern but controlled. Each member of the crew had faced the unknown before, but never like this. Never something that stalked thought itself. The shuttle entered the outskirts of the crystalline cluster just as the mind's distant presence flickered faintly back into clarity, not close, but searching. Maelden identified it first. It is probing again, weakly, like it is reaching through fog. The survivor nodded. The cluster confuses it. The natural frequency distortions interfere with its ability to interpret consciousness. But do not become complacent. It is ancient. It adapts. The crystalline asteroids shimmered ahead, their surfaces refracting starlight in shimmering halos. Each shard-like formation pulsed with a rhythmic glow that resonated gently in the cabin, creating a low hum that was almost soothing. Duran guided the shuttle into a dense region where the asteroids' frequencies overlapped, creating a web of distortion that would mask their presence. As the shuttle slipped into the heart of the cluster, the oppressive pressure that had lingered since the derelict encounter finally ebbed entirely. For the first time in hours, Ravel felt the weight lift from his thoughts. The survivors' breathing steadied slightly. The crew collectively exhaled, relief mixing with exhaustion. Maelden deactivated non-essential systems and dimmed the lights. "We should remain quiet," she said. "No strong energy signatures, no communicative output. We stay hidden." Samorin nodded. "The mind cannot follow what it cannot perceive." Nerel added, "Let us hope it cannot perceive this place at all." Ravel sat beside the survivor again. "You said earlier that only humans could fight this thing, but how? We cannot confront something that does not fully exist in physical form." The survivor's gaze grew intense. "You must learn to shape your thoughts as unpredictably as your actions, to turn your chaotic minds into weapons, to create conceptual paradoxes that disrupt the mind's coherence. It cannot consume what it cannot interpret." Arasan groaned. "I am a soldier. I am not built for philosophical warfare." The survivor smiled faintly. "That is precisely why you can succeed." As the survivor explained, the cabin filled with the soft, refracted glow of the crystalline asteroids. The hum of the frequencies resonated through their bones, creating an atmosphere that felt both alien and oddly comforting. Ravel listened intently, piecing together strategies he had never imagined would be necessary. Ideas formed in his mind wild, chaotic, unpredictable, and for the first time since entering the derelict, he felt something resembling determination. The mind had marked him. But he would not be prey. The crystals around them pulsed softly, creating patterns of light that danced across the cabin walls. The shuttle drifted silently, hidden in the labyrinth of refracted starlight. For now, they were safe. But safety was temporary, the mind was patient, and it would return. The shuttle drifted in the heart of the crystalline cluster, each asteroid refracting light into a kaleidoscope of colors that made the interior shimmer faintly. The crew moved with caution, their every action tempered by exhaustion and the ever-present awareness that the devouring mind was still out there, waiting, calculating. Commander Ravel stood beside the auric survivor, listening to the soft pulse that resonated from the crystals. The sound was almost musical in its cadence, a rhythmic vibration that seemed to synchronize with the subconscious mind. "It is remarkable," Samorin murmured, tracing a finger over the edge of a control panel. "Even without physical intervention, These formations create a coherent field capable of masking psychic signatures. The survivor nodded slowly. This is the only place in the system where one might hide from it long enough to prepare. But hiding alone will not suffice. It waits. It adapts. You must confront it, and your confrontation cannot follow normal rules. Ravel's hands clenched into fists. Then we confront it by breaking the rules. But how? The survivor's golden eyes flickered faintly with renewed strength. Your minds, your capacity to think without predictability. The devouring mind can process thought, but it cannot consume chaos that sustains paradox. Your survival depends upon your ability to generate irreducible disorder. You must become a living paradox. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Maelden spoke first, her tone measured. You are asking us to weaponize our cognition, to fight with ideas, imagination, contradiction. That is unprecedented, even for humans. We have never trained for this. Then train we must, Ravel said, his voice firm, carrying the weight of command. It is the only way to survive. We cannot outgun it. We cannot outrun it. We can only outthink it in a manner it cannot anticipate. The survivor nodded approvingly, though weakness etched their features. Yes, and you must do this collectively. The mind may attempt to isolate individuals, but unified chaos strengthens the resistance. You must think together while thinking apart. Each thought must diverge yet converge in its unpredictability. The crew spent the next hours preparing, their minds oscillating between fear, calculation, and forced imagination. Samorin instructed the team in mental exercises designed to expand cognitive pathways in erratic, unpredictable sequences. Nurail Arason and Tomai practiced projecting conflicting thought patterns, imagining impossible geometries, temporal contradictions, and fluid forms that could not exist in any known physical or metaphysical system. Maelden created tactical paradoxes, visualizing overlapping scenarios that could not logically coexist, yet continuously rearranging them. Ravel focused on maintaining presence, meditating through the shifting resonance of the cluster, allowing his thoughts to scatter and reform like fractals, refusing linearity. The auric survivor guided them, reinforcing the principle that each mind must generate dissonance while maintaining cohesion, like a choir singing melodies that were never meant to harmonize, yet somehow resonated as one. It was exhausting, unnatural, and terrifying, but it was working. The shuttle's instruments registered faint distortions at the edges of the cluster, fluctuations that indicated the mind was probing but failing to interpret. It had sensed them and could not understand what it could not predict. As they continued, a new phenomenon appeared. The crystalline asteroids pulsed in a series of irregular rhythms, seemingly reacting to the crew's collective mental output. The lights danced across the cabin walls in response to thought patterns, creating a visual symphony of impossible geometry. Maelden gasped. It is interacting with us. It is responding to cognitive input. The survivor nodded, their voice stronger than it had been in days. The crystals amplify your paradox. You are no longer merely hiding. You are shaping the space around you with your minds. The mind will feel pressure before it can reach you physically. Even Samorin, the scientist, could not mask his awe. We are turning imagination into defense, into armor, into strategy. Ravel allowed himself a grim smile. Then let us make it armor worthy of humanity. They worked in shifts, the shuttle's engines idling quietly within the cluster, while the crew projected layers of chaotic thought. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time itself seemed slippery within the distorted psychic field. The mind did not attack, but its probing influence throbbed at the edges of perception, a constant reminder that it was observing, calculating, learning. Each failed attempt to decipher the crew's intentions created a ripple that could be felt, faintly, in the hull. Then, as Ravel's meditation deepened, he sensed a subtle shift. The mind was focusing, narrowing its attention, testing for vulnerability. Its probing pulse intensified, striking at the outer layers of their cognitive defenses. Nerel cried out involuntarily as the sensation pressed against her skull. Arason tightened his jaw, teeth grinding against the psychic interference. Maelden's console flickered with chaotic readings, indicating that the entity's attempts to model the crew's thought patterns were failing. The survivor whispered urgently, "It is testing you. It seeks an entry point. Do not yield. Expand the paradox. Multiply contradictions. Think in impossible sequences. Refuse coherence. We are readying for the inevitable confrontation." Then the disturbance appeared on the sensors, not material, but a surge of psionic energy that rippled across the cluster, warping the very field around them. The mind had manifested in a way they could perceive more directly, a swirling mass of shadow and light, fractal and fluid, growing from a nexus of intention. Its size was unfathomable, its presence more massive than the shuttle could measure. Its influence pressed on them like a physical weight, tugging at focus, pulling thoughts toward the unrelenting hunger at its core. Ravel steadied himself. "Everyone hold the pattern, do not falter. It wants us to break formation. It wants chaos to collapse into fear." The survivor added, their voice strong and commanding, "It feeds on coherence. It cannot consume what has no predictable shape. Become impossible. Become alive in contradiction. Strike the mind not with weapons, but with the strength of your own unpredictability." Ravel closed his eyes and let his mind scatter. He imagined himself simultaneously on the shuttle, on the desert station, on the shattered towers of the Auric civilization, and in a space that did not exist at all. Thoughts fractured, multiplied, contradicted each other, folded back upon themselves, then expanded outward into the cluster. The other crew members followed suit, each projecting their chaotic imaginations into the same psychic field, forming an interwoven lattice of human thought that was as violent and unpredictable as it was coherent in its collective randomness. The mind recoiled as the pulses struck it, fractal tendrils dissolving briefly under the assault of dissonance. It shrieked not in sound, but in pressure and intention, sending waves of force that rattled the shuttle violently. The Auric survivor hovered at the edge of consciousness, guiding them with precise, calm reinforcement. "Do not stop. Do not hesitate. It will test and it will tear at you. Your defiance is its weakness." The engagement stretched on for what seemed like hours, though measurement of time became irrelevant. The mind expanded and contracted, probing, striking, retreating, and then striking again. Each human thought became a living blade, a fluctuating paradox that it could not consume. The field of the crystalline cluster responded in kind, amplifying the effects, creating a feedback loop of impossible energy that distorted space and perception alike. The mind's mass fluctuated wildly, fracturing into multiple shadowed facets, then recombining into forms even more chaotic. But each time it recoiled, each time it failed to penetrate the crew's mental defense, the mind became weaker in its manifestation, dissipating fragments of itself into the surrounding field. The shuttle trembled violently, but it held, buoyed by the field and by the crew's relentless focus. Finally, after a surge that threatened to collapse the cabin, the mind's influence faltered. Its attention wavered, confused and fragmented. The shards of its presence began to recede into the void, leaving only residual tendrils that slithered back into the far reaches of space. The mind had not been destroyed, but it had been repelled, forced to retreat and reconsider its approach. Ravel opened his eyes and saw the crew leaning heavily against consoles, breathing hard, bodies trembling, yet their faces reflected triumph and exhaustion. The Auric survivor exhaled a faint sigh, their eyes softening. "It is gone for now," they whispered. "You have done what no civilization before could accomplish. You have survived the devouring mind. And in your chaos, you have weaponized yourself in ways it cannot anticipate." Samorin looked around, stunned. We actually did it. We survived." Maelden nodded slowly, "And not through brute force, not through conventional strategy, through our unpredictability, through human thought itself. Ravel allowed himself a long exhale, closing his eyes for a moment. Then we will need to prepare for when it returns. It will return. It is patient, ancient, and relentless, but we now have knowledge, we have experience, and that will be enough for the next encounter. The shuttle remained within the crystalline cluster, shields at minimal output to avoid detection. The Auric survivors slowly recovered strength, their voice regaining clarity. I cannot travel further. But I have given you the tools you need. You understand now that your greatest strength lies not in machinery, not in weapons, but in the fluidity of your own consciousness. Ravel nodded solemnly. Then we will carry that knowledge forward, not just for ourselves, but for all who could be threatened by this entity. Aresen allowed a faint grin. We are not just soldiers, we are paradoxes now. The survivor managed a faint, approving smile. Yes, and that is enough to make a difference. Silence fell over the cabin, heavy but relieved. Outside, the crystalline cluster shimmered in response to their psychic presence, creating an almost comforting glow that seemed to affirm their victory. Though temporary, it was a hard-won respite, and the crew knew that their fight against the Devouring Mind had only begun. Yet, for the first time, they felt capable, not merely of surviving, but of challenging something that had once seemed beyond all comprehension. Ravel stood beside the survivor, gazing into the refracted light. "We will be ready," he said quietly, "no matter what comes next." And as the shuttle drifted through the heart of the crystalline cluster, surrounded by impossible geometry, refracted starlight, and the faint, lingering echoes of the mind's retreat, humanity's capacity for chaos had proven itself not a weakness, but a weapon. The Auric survivors' golden eyes met Ravel's, and in that silent moment, an understanding passed between them. The galaxy was vast, terrifying, and unknowable, but humanity's unpredictability could carve a path through even the most ancient and insatiable threats. And with that, the shuttle and its crew settled into the pulsating, refracted calm, ready to endure, to learn, and to fight again should the Devouring Mind return to consume thought itself.